Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching today's Midday Western U.S. Regional Forecast video brought to you by Nutrien Ag Solutions. Now, I know I don't typically start you off with this kind of view when it comes to the weather here in the western part of the United States, but this is important here. So we're looking down right on top of the North Pole, and I want you to see this. This is looking over the next 10 days from this morning's operational European model run, and we're looking at precipitation anomalies. And what I want you to key in on is what I'm about to overlay in my drawings. I see these features. Wet coming in like this, wet coming in like this, and wet coming in like this. So if you notice, that particular flow pattern is one that begins in Japan with a polar jet stream that then curls into British Columbia. It does hit the Pacific Northwest. The second piece, the subtropical branch, is coming off of quite a bit of active convection, thunderstorms that are happening here in the central part of the equatorial Pacific. And it seems to be continually transporting moisture here into the central part of the United States. And then that same subtropical piece of the jet stream keeps flowing across the Pacific, something like this. And we've been in this pattern for quite some time, and it is one that has really practiced avoidance over California. And that's what I want to talk about. This is what it looks like in the jet stream winds. I just fast forwarded this out about a week just to show you what the winds are looking like as they kind of circumnavigate the North Pole here. Again, very strong zonal piece of the jet stream that then breaks. See it? And that is that split we've talked so much about. This keeps, well, the southern part of the United States and the central part of the United States and parts of the southeast very active. But this is a problem when it comes to precipitation getting all the way through the southern half of California. It keeps the Northwest wet. And we need to be talking about whether or not this particular pattern has any sort of a change coming. And I'll get to that at the end of this video. So over the next week, if we look at precipitation anomalies, you can see, you can almost just find where the influence of that high pressure is going to be. We're still showing up with deficits here in the southern two-thirds of the state of California and getting over to Nevada as well. Whereas parts of northern California, coastal Oregon, and Washington have the potential for having an excess of a half inch to in some locations up to 4 or 5 inches of excess rainfall over the next week. And you can see that it makes it into the interior of the Northwest as well. So this is certainly a very dynamic setup that, again, is practicing a kind of avoidance here for the southern two-thirds of California. And we've seen it. Look over the last 14 days. Parts of the Pacific Northwest here are generally between 100 and 200% of normal on rainfall. Where if you just come south of, let's just call it south of San Francisco, but over here to this part of Nevada, just cut this corner out and you can see how dry things have been in that area. To show you what it's looked like, I just grabbed the southern two-thirds of the state of California. I went back 180 days, so this is a half of a year's worth of information here. Now, the dashed line in the graph on the top represents the normal rate of accumulation of precipitation. And we were very dry August, September, October, and the beginning of November. So you can see that flat line there for quite some time. Then look at the precipitation that came in the month of November and in late December. That brought us up like this and then shot us up again. But we flatlined again up here over the last, well, couple of weeks going back to the end of December, and you can see that down here as well. And so the question is, when are we going to get back over to these wetter patterns? And I'm going to discuss that at the end of this video. Because right now, well, this is just a look here of the last 24 hours or so of our infrared satellite imagery across the Pacific. And we can see that while storm systems seem to be stacked up here and moving across the North Pacific, heading off to the northwest, the main plume of moisture that's coming out here, you know, that is our Pineapple Express, but it's not beginning where the pineapples are grown. In other words, it's not starting here coming toward California. It's further south coming off of these storms, riding now into the south central part of the United States. And you can see it if I just show you precipitable water this morning. So when you look at this, these values up here represent greater than normal precipitable water, and these represent less. And the big push is here. And so that is at the expense of bringing that moisture into California, which is very typical of this time of year. So let's watch this. I want you to pay attention to, as I've been stressing for a while now, all of the region, all of the area inside that circle I just drew, where we have just pretty dominant higher atmospheric pressure with time. Storm systems, they kind of skirt around it and they go heading toward British Columbia, and they just keep tossing their main frontal boundaries here into Northern California, Oregon, Washington, and then that moves into Idaho as well. That is what I just drew here is basically the name of the game for the next 10 days. In fact, I'll just do this. You ready? Just watch it. I mean, you can see how the systems are progressing. Now, I want to show you some of those details because there's some important things here. So we see that early this morning, our next main rain band makes it on shore here. These snow elevations are relatively high. The pattern has become a bit more mild, and so we're talking bigger snows here are going to be well above 4,000 feet, whereas we have seen them down as low as 1,500 to 2,000 feet. Clips the northern part of California by this afternoon and this evening. But you'll notice the precipitation just doesn't make it south here into the San Joaquin Valley or certainly the LA Basin. The high pressure cell's in charge. Snow moves into the Intermountain West here, northern Rockies, as the next system. Look at them. See the lows just stacked up here as they start to barrel in to the northwest again. So we just get this relentless onshore flow with any sort of a break in the northwest only lasting at most maybe 24 hours. But I just took you all the way through Saturday of this week, and you can just see, if I just step back, how many times we get these low pressure systems hitting British Columbia, but then dragging their fronts right here along Northern California, Oregon, and Washington, and then eventually into the interior parts of the Northwest, getting through the Snake River Valley, for example, and over into Montana. Now, this upcoming weekend, we may finally have a system. You can see it. I'll step you back. Saturday night, Saturday overnight hours, getting into Sunday morning. We can see that by Sunday, we may be able to bring a little weak low pressure system that can finally skirt through the San Joaquin Valley down here towards Southern California. What's making it all possible? Well, the high is moved out. Remember, we always talk about this high moves farther west, the better we are, of getting more moisture into Southern California. But as you'll notice, that high migrates right back over into this area as the next low does the same thing the previous ones did, and that's target coastal Oregon, Washington, and up here in British Columbia. That's your next 8 or 9 days here looking at total precipitation. Let's put it together in a few maps here, though. So over the next 7 days, what are we looking at in terms of total accumulated precipitation? Well, again, we'll just divide it right there, and you can see that north of that line, I just drew plenty of precip in Northern California, coastal Oregon, and Washington, and we're getting the snow here into parts of the Blue Mountains, getting into the northern Rockies, and also here into the Sawtooth. So that's at least a good thing. To show you those snowfall amounts, remember, we're talking about higher elevations with these next few systems, 4,000 plus feet, but we're going to continue to add to the snowfall amounts we've been improving on over the last 15 to 20 days here in the Cascade Mountains. Meanwhile, the Sierra Nevada, while picking up snow, not picking up the huge snowfall amounts that we can typically get if that Pineapple Express were to set up shop. Instead, remember, it's down here, and you can almost see it on the edge of the screen here, making things quite active in the midsection of the country. But generally here in the northern Rockies, we're able to grab in some locations well over 10 to 15 inches of snow, but the Snake River Valley on the whole missing out on this unless you're at the far eastern edge of it, which is typical. That's a very typical snowfall pattern for the Snake River Valley. So what about week 2? Well, it's the same thing. Looking out to week 2, the drier bias is in California, the wetter bias, British Columbia, coastal Oregon, and Washington. And that just seems to be the pattern that we are stuck in here. Well, before I give you the longer range outlook on that precip, I at least want to show you what the temperatures are doing. We will be seeing that the coldest air over the next 5 days is beginning to set up here in Alaska and here over parts north of the Hudson Bay, but getting up toward Greenland. We'll see general ridging that's coming through the eastern half of North America, and as a consequence, that ridging starts here, and we get the milder pattern, the slow warming up of our temperatures throughout this week, getting into next week. In fact, if I show you day 5 through 10, you can see that much of our western region here is showing up with near average to above average temperatures, and it's the same pattern day 10 through 15. Where's the coldest air? It's here. Okay, and while that is the setup, I don't think we're going to be able to break this down anytime soon. So I expect to see the flow pattern looking something like this when we talk about our troughs and ridges over the next, well, at least 10 days, with the deepest trough sitting here, and therefore the systems curl around it, and they do that. And that's why California is missed, but the Pacific Northwest gets in on the precipitation here. That's our setup, at least for the next 10 plus days. So I've been making this case in all my weather videos today. I'm going to address this again in tomorrow's long range. We have got several teleconnections. These are basically pieces of flow in the atmosphere at different places all over the planet that are all right now constructively interfering. In other words, they are working together to give us this pattern. And we are going to be asking ourselves in tomorrow's long-range video, when does that fall apart? Because if one piece of this begins to fall apart, we may get a cascading effect that changes everything. Now, it's certainly not going to be happening at the end of January and the very beginning of February. But the map you've been looking at over there on the right, well, this is now the forecast map through the next, well, this is the entire month of February. And we notice that the models want to keep doing what they've been doing. And you can see the influence of the higher atmospheric pressure that they're putting in this area. I'm going to make a case that we shouldn't be trusting this longer range forecast from the European fully. If we see one piece of this coming apart, it's going to allow the other pieces to eventually kind of, well, deconstructively interfere. And that's going to be a critical piece to be watching. The models will not be the first to pick up on this. We're going to have to look for these teleconnections in the observations, and I'm going to work hard to do that for you. So I don't want you to take a snapshot of that map on the right and think that it's going to be, the gospel truth about the weather through the next 30 days or so. So let's keep an eye together and watch this together unfold. And that's why we do these videos every single day, to keep us in tune with how these patterns are changing. So with that, I'll wrap it up there. Hope you have a good week. I'll talk to you again very soon. Thank you.